from time to time, but you should be fine if you did not do Postgres yet. If it feels overwhelming, of course, feel free to drop off. Let me share my screen here. Make sure everything is on the up and up. Yep, looks good. Share screen. And there we go. So, as always, all the slides are posted here on projects.100xdevs.com. Feel free to go ahead, go behind. Today we're learning Prisma. Prisma is very easy to know, if I'm being honest. If you've done Mongoose, if you've done SQL, the hard bits, this actually, the whole point of an ORM is to make your life slightly easier. So there's no real point of learning this, if I'm being honest. You can just go through the docs and understand it very quickly. But we'll still try our best to understand it in a more structured fashion. What Prisma is, why was it needed, what problems it solves, why is it better than the libraries we have used until now, why everyone uses this basically. If you look at any project, I think cal.com, dub.sh, any good project will use either Prisma or there's another one called Drizzle. There are two popular ORMs. There are 1,000 reasons why you should use an ORM versus, do things that we've been doing until now. So that's what this class will be. Under the hood, still SQL queries will happen. Under the hood, still Mongoose queries happen. But these make your life much easier for 1,000 reasons. That's what we'll understand today. All right. Try to keep it slow, but at the same time, I think we can wrap it up in an hour and a half. I don't think there's too much to learn here. And if you feel it's going slow, feel free to zoom across. At the end on the 12th slide, there is sort of an assignment. I haven't explained it very well, but it's a to-do application that you have to build in TypeScript and Prisma. So feel free to skip ahead if you feel the class is slow. With that, I think we have enough people here. We can kick things off. Today, we are understanding what are ORMs. I would urge you to go to projects.100xdevs.com, and over there you'll find the Prisma track. Open it up. This is what we'll be going through today. What are ORMs? There is a very teachy definition, which I'll go through very quickly, but feel free to ignore it. The teachy definition, this by the way is like Indian teacher, the way we learn, back in school. ORM stands for Object Relational Mapping, a programming technique used in software development to convert data between incompatible type systems in object-oriented programming languages. Too many buzzwords here. This technique creates a virtual object database that can be used from within the programming language. ORMs are used to abstract complexities of the underlying database into simpler, more easily manageable objects within the code. High level, what does this mean? It means it makes your life much easier in any programming language. Incompatible type systems basically means, depending on what language you're currently using, be it Java, be it Node.js, be it Golang, an ORM makes it easy for you to interact with the database, talk to the database, write some basic function calls that let you update the database, do CRUD on top of your database. That's what an ORM is. It's not a Node.js specific thing. All languages have ORMs. The one that we're learning today, Prisma, is a Node.js specific ORM, but you have ORMs in Java as well, most of the other languages as well. Java, definitely know there are ORMs because I've used them. Easier to digest definition. ORMs let you interact with your database without worrying too much about the underlying syntax. The big thing to learn here is SQL, even though it's very useful to know, it's good to know, it's not needed as a software developer. It's needed as a data analyst because you have to write a lot of SQL queries. But as a software developer, thankfully today there are these tools called ORMs that make it easy for you so that you don't have to understand the depths of SQL. A lot of it is abstracted out. We'll see how. All right. First off, why ORMs? What benefits do they provide you? So I have some very simple comparisons between non-ORM Node.js code and ORM Node.js code. The first one, if you look at it, on the left, this is the query that we wrote yesterday. If you want to get all the users with a specific email, this is what the query looks like. There is another way to write this query as well. harkirat96@gmail.com or whatever this email is, I can directly put here as well. Or this is the mildly more complicated syntax. The thing here is though, you need to know SQL. You need to understand select star from users. This is the syntax for structured query language. Versus if you're using an ORM, this is the code that you will write. User.find email equal to this. Very similar to Mongoose, if you remember. This is much easier than this. This is the first abstraction that an ORM provides you. Simpler syntax converts objects into SQL queries under the hood. You write this code, this gets converted into SQL if the database that you're using is Postgres or MySQL. But you don't have to worry about writing all of this. That's what an ORM provides you. Number 2, abstraction that lets you flip between databases. A unified API, irrespective of the database that you are using. Prisma is not specific to Postgres. You can use Prisma for MongoDB, for Postgres, this should have been MySQL, or a bunch of databases that they support. And if you use Prisma, your Node.js code will look like this only. User.find email, and you can decide what database you want to use. You don't ever have to change the Node.js code if you ever want to flip from MongoDB to Postgres. Some extra things you have to do if you move from a NoSQL database to an SQL database. But literally, if you want to switch from Postgres to MySQL, your application logic does not change at all. You just have to change on one place. Okay, the database that I'm using now is MySQL. So that's the second benefit of ORMs, which is abstraction that lets you flip databases that you are using. You don't have to worry about the underlying database technology and how to write a Mongoose query or an SQL query. You just have to write this. Under the hood, it converts everything for you. Number 3, type safety / auto completion. This might not feel like a huge problem to you right now because we've just gotten into TypeScript. But as your applications grow in most big companies, it's literally looked down upon if your types are like this. What do I mean when I say types are like this? If you write await client.query, and let's say this is an insert query or a select query, and you get back the data in the result, there is no types associated with this result. It says const result : any. You don't know what result.user.email would be. You cannot infer that using TypeScript. We have just introduced TypeScript, which is why this might not seem like a problem because you've just started to learn TypeScript. But you ideally want something like this. Okay, bhai, when I do a user db.find email harkirat@gmail.com or whatever, even if I do a query like this, I want the result to have specified types. Okay, haan bhai, user looks something like this. As you can see, if I hover over user, that's what I've done here. It shows me the type of user. Okay, it has an email string, username string, password string. This is what this query will return you. There will need to be an await here. So don't get too much into details of what is this syntax and what is this library. The goal is, okay, whenever you do a find on that library, the thing that it returns you needs to have a type associated with it. You don't want any as the type return. ORMs give you that. They give you type safety and auto completion. The other benefit of this is, okay, if you are using ORMs, as you write your code, it will start to give you suggestions. Today we have AI, so all of this sort of got thrown out of the window. AIs can help you in either one of these. But if you did not have an AI and something that can predict text, then this would at least give you some auto completion. If I would write user dot, it would say email is a string, username is a string. It would be able to, my VS Code will be able to infer these types. That's the third benefit. And lastly, something called automatic migrations. Before that, we should understand what are migrations. Basically, if you have a simple Postgres application, it's very hard to keep track of all the commands that led to the creation of the current schema. This part is important. Understand this a little better. Okay, as your full stack application grows, initially you might have only a users table. Okay, haan bhai, we have a simple application. User comes and signs up. Eventually, you might be like, nahin, we are a to-do application, so we need another to-do table. After that, you might be like, okay, now we want to support phone numbers as well. So along with username, password, first name and last name, we need a phone number field. This schema keeps changing. So let's say you start to write this application locally and then you want to deploy it to production. You want to deploy it to a new database. How will you remember what all queries you ran? You ran a bunch of these create table queries, right? Where will you store all of these? How will you migrate to a new database? That is what is called a migration. Basically a very long file or multiple files where you store, okay, this specific schema was reached by running all of these commands. Not worrying about the data. Don't worry about the data inside the tables, but the structure of the tables. What commands were run to reach that structure? Putting them in a centralized place is what's called a migration. For example, you might first run the query, okay, create a table users, which has name and email. Then eventually you might run another query, which we haven't seen until now, but as the name suggests, alter table users, add a new column called phone number. Eventually you want to support 4 numbers, let's say. Now you have these 2 queries. If I start a fresh database, I need to run both of these queries there. How will I remember as the developer? I to ran them randomly that's when I started my first database. You need a place where you can track all of these migrations. ORMs give you that. They give you a centralized place where all of these migrations are present. In fact, there is a code snippet that I have pointed you to. This is the code of the website app.100xdevs.com. And here, if you go to the CMS/Prisma/migrations folder, you will see how, over time the schema has changed. If you open any one of these, you will see it says alter table video metadata, add column slides. So when I introduced slides on the website so that you can click on a link and open the slides is when I ran this migration. This is all present here in the code itself. So if I ever want to switch my database, all of my SQL commands that led to the creation of that database are present here so that I can always, run a single query and all my new database gets migrated. Are we good? Do we understand the 4 benefits of using an ORM compared to a normal SQL database? 85%. I don't know what's too difficult about this, but maybe as time goes by and we see a real application of this, it gets a little better. Repeat each point, please. Okay, let me do a quick recap of the 4 points. Point number 1, simpler syntax. This though I hope makes sense. Okay, rather than as the developer writing this, you can write simpler code. User.find email harkirat96. Don't have to worry about SQL syntax. Number 2, abstraction that lets you flip the database. Basically, okay, you write the same Node.js code and you can just flip one variable. Okay, I want to use MongoDB, I want to use Postgres, I want to use MySQL. Of course, you shouldn't do this in the middle of development. Okay, I already have a Postgres database. Now I switch it over to MongoDB. You shouldn't do that. You also have to move all the data over. So never do this. But you can initially decide, okay, bhai, abhi to I am writing my code. Let me see what I want to use. Could be Mongo, could be Postgres, could be MySQL. Once you've decided, generally don't move your application once you have users who have put in the data. But before users have put in any data, you can, without understanding the syntax of MongoDB, or let's say in the future a new database comes, GoDB. If you have a new syntax, a new database that has come, all you have to do is flip a single variable in your Node.js application and you're good to go. You don't have to change all your underlying queries. Number 3, type safety. We will see this very soon when we start to write the code. Okay, when we wrote the code yesterday, it gave us any as the type because this library that we were using yesterday, the PG library, does not have good type safety. Prisma does. So we will see why and where this becomes useful very soon. And lastly, migrations is something we will also see very soon. So even if you don't understand this point, it's fine. But the high level point is, okay, as your application grows, let's say you are Paytm. Initially, you only support UPI. Eventually, you support net banking as well. After that, you support credit cards as well. Your database schema will keep on growing. The number of tables that you have will keep on growing. Having a single place where you can keep track of all of these SQL queries, for example, create table users, and then create table UPI, and then create table net banking. If you have a single place where all of these files are stored, that is beneficial because if you want to move from one database to another, you can always just run all of these commands. You have a place where these commands are present. And this example that I showed was this example right here. Okay, even for our website, database changes very quickly. As you can see, suddenly I added duration. Okay, if the users wants to see the duration below a video, they should be able to see it. So if you look at the SQL here, it says alter table video metadata, adds column duration. I introduced a new column and that's present in my source code itself. All of these files are present here. I run a single command and if there is a new database that I start, let's say our database goes down, let's say NeonDB goes down today or wherever I'm hosting, AWS goes down. I want to move to GCP. I have a single place where all of my schema is stored. Is my data also stored here? No. Data is not stored here. If AWS goes down, my data goes down with it. You all will have to re-sign up. I will have to re-upload the videos. But at least the structure of what my database looks like. My schema is present in a centralized place. That is another thing that ORMs give you. Don't understand it, we will see it very soon, don't worry, as we start to code a bit. Okay, so until now, what have we discussed? What are ORMs? We have not discussed Prisma, we have discussed what are ORMs. Prisma is one ORM in Node.js. You can have an ORM in Java, you can have an ORM in Golang. The one that we are using is Prisma, which is a Node.js specific ORM. And it gives you, if you look at their website, 4 things at a high level. Let's understand these 4 things very well. Prisma unlocks a new level of developer. If you go to their website, at the very top, you will see a pitch. Okay, what exactly is Prisma? Prisma unlocks a new level of developer experience and working with databases thanks to its intuitive data model, automatic migrations, type safety, and auto completion. This is their pitch. Let's try to understand and break it down a little better. What do they mean when they say data model, automatic migrations, type safety, and auto completion? First one, data model. Again, you will understand this slightly better from the next slide onwards when we actually start to write this code. But let me try to explain what they mean when they say they have an intuitive data model. They say, okay, in a single file, define your schema, what it looks like, what tables you have, what field each table has, and how the rows are related to each other. You don't have to write any of this. You don't have to write any SQL query, create table users, alter table users. No, you have to give Prisma a single file where you define somehow, this is my users table, this is my to-dos table, and Prisma will take care of actually converting it into SQL queries. Let me open my iPad here to explain this slightly better. So when you are using Prisma, if this is your Node.js application, you have to define a single file here, which is called schema.prisma, where you define, okay, bhai, this is the schema.prisma file. There is a users table that looks something like this. There is a to-dos table that looks something like this. And that is all. That is the data model that you provide. That is all that the developer has to write. Prisma under the hood converts this into SQL queries. Ki haan bhai, there is a create table query for the users table, and then there is another create table query for the to-dos table. You as the application developer have to just worry about this. This is what they mean when they say an intuitive data model. Okay, bhai, you just have to define your schema once in a single file. We will take care of if there is something new added, we will add a new migration. If there is something that you have updated, let's say to-dos now supports another fields, we will create another file which will contain the SQL query for it. You don't have to worry about writing the underlying SQL queries. That is what intuitive data model means. We will see very soon in the next slide when we start to write some code. Automatic migrations. This is the same thing I talked about in the last slide. Okay. Once you start to write this schema.prisma file and you make changes in it, it will automatically create migrations. It will automatically create files. A new SQL query was ran to create the table, to update the table. It will figure out the diff in this file, what all you added, what all you removed, and create a migration for it. Migration is a new buzzword that's sort of good to know for you. Okay, what does a migration mean? Migration means, okay, if you create a backend application, a full stack application, and this is your database in AWS. You started the database, you're just beginning to deploy your application. Before you deploy your application, you have to make sure the database runs all the create table queries. Your database has the new schema. This is called a migration. What are you doing? You are doing a database migration. You're migrating your database. Okay, bhai, there you go. These are the commands you need to run to be able to get the current schema of my application on here. And in the future, if AWS goes down and you move to a new database, you have to run the migrations here as well. Prisma gives you automatic migrations, which means it keeps track of all the migrations that have happened as your application grows. That is what Prisma provides you out of the box. We will see this very soon, but this is the same thing that I'm talking about here. Okay, all the files that you see here in this code base are actually migrations that Prisma has created for me. I did not write these files. They were automatically generated. Type safety. As I said, when you write Prisma code, you will see it gives you very nice types. If you hover over user, you will see ki, this is what the username looks like in the database. And auto completion, which is again, if you're using Visual Studio Code or even some other IDE, if you use Prisma, since it knows the type of user, it has an email field, username field, and a password field, it'll give you auto completion inside Visual Studio Code, even without an AI. Today we have AIs, so this sort of is not a big benefit today. Do we understand this? Can we start to write some code? Do we understand the benefits of using an ORM and specifically the 4 buzzwords that Prisma provides you, the pitch of Prisma? This is what we give you. Okay, great. Let's move on to the next slide and let's start to install Prisma in our application. That's all the buzzwords we need. Iske baad, we have to just write a lot of code where we are not using Mongoose, we are not using PG, we are using Prisma the library. Okay? So let's start by creating a fresh project. All the instructions are here. I'm going to follow them on my side. Would urge you to do the same. Create an empty project and run npm init-y init to initialize a package.json. Once you do, you should see an empty package.json. Open it in Visual Studio Code. Once you've done both of these things, initialize TypeScript. Oh, first add a bunch of dependencies. Doesn't matter. Do either one of these first. Like the order doesn't matter basically. This will add a bunch of dependencies to your code base. Specifically, Prisma. Prisma is the only one you need. This is what they officially suggest. So I put everything here, but you don't need TypeScript if you've already installed TypeScript globally. You don't need TS Node unless you're using TS Node, which we won't. And if you install TypeScript, you need TypeScript. Basically do all of it. You don't need all of it. Just Prisma would work as well. But for the sake of this tutorial, install everything. And then npx tsc --init to initialize your project. Initialize TypeScript in your project. I'm going to wait, no rush. Just follow the instructions here. I'll wait for 2-3 minutes and then we'll start. Hopefully we have done this many times, so this isn't too difficult. People who are facing TypeScript issues, there are a few standard issues you might run into. Number 1, okay, the import syntax is not running for you. Number 2, the TypeScript version that you're trying to install is not right. If you're seeing one of these 2 issues, a TA will help you out here. This is a very computer specific issue. Most probably you either have TypeScript installed globally that's causing issues, or the version of TypeScript that you've installed globally is pretty old. These are the 2 reasons that usually this comes. I can suggest a few solutions. First solution I can suggest is, rather than using npm, use yarn. So install npm install -g yarn and then use yarn instead of npm everywhere. So do a yarn install Prisma or add Prisma if you're using yarn. Or just, you'll have to wait it out for this tutorial. We cannot use JavaScript for today because Prisma provides you types. We need to look at that. So yesterday we were still able to use JavaScript. Today we won't be able to. So high level, if these steps work for you, great. If not, you will need a TA to help you out. But I'll do a poll in like a minute or 2 to see how many people were able to, at least do it. So you understand where you stand. All right. npx prisma init is the last command that you need to run. That will give you an output. We will see what that output is. But yeah, I'm going to wait for 2-3 more minutes. Take your time. Initialize an empty project. Nothing new, nothing fancy. Just creating a empty project, changing all the things here. And if you've missed the TypeScript class, a few of these things might feel a little overwhelming. So let me quickly explain what I'm doing. Root dir in TS. So when you run npx tsc -- init, it will create a tsconfig.json file for you. Here you put all of your TypeScript configurations. Inside this, usually in good projects, you will see the root dir is changed to /src and the out dir is changed to /dist. So that's what I'm doing here and here, just to structure your project a little better. What this means is all your code will be present here and all your output JavaScript will be present here. That's it. And this command is a new command which we are running to initialize Prisma in our project. What this does is it will create a Prisma folder in your project inside which the schema.prisma file will be present. We will explore this very soon, but that's what npx prisma init does. It creates this file for you, and we'll see what this file is very soon. Right, take 2 more minutes. Let me see how everyone's doing. Oh wow, fucking A. I need to get better at this. Very good. 85%, which is great. I think 85% means surprisingly much more than I would have hoped for. I'll wait for another minute for 15%, but then it basically means good to go. If someone is not able to set up the project right now, you can follow along and understand. Or if I was you, I would drop off right now. Make sure my TypeScript configurations locally are working correctly, and then come back here. This suddenly reminds me, there's one more thing we need to do, guys. How many of you have a NeonDB database now? Because we will need it very soon. Do you already have a Postgres database either running locally or on NeonDB somewhere else? Do you already have access to a NeonDB, a Postgres database? So you need to know that next. So I would urge you to get a database from neon.tech. Just go here, sign up, and it will take you to a page where you can create a fresh project. Just click on new project. And once you do, it will show you something like this. And here you will find your Postgres connection string. If you don't understand this, means you missed yesterday's class. So feel free to drop off again. And first go to the Postgres class and come back. But you need this Postgres database before you can actually run any of the code today, or proceed today. Everyone who does have that Postgres database, put your Postgres credentials here in schema.prisma. This file will sort of contain all of your models, which, if you remember from the last slide, basically all your tables, what you want to create. But before you do that, you have to provide it, okay, bhai, what database are we using? For us is Postgres SQL. So that is what it comes by default. So hopefully you see this as well. And a database URL, which we are going to hard code right now. Ideally, you shouldn't hard code, but for now, I'm going to hard code. So put your Postgres SQL database connection string here. I'm going to do the same. If you don't have one, it's mostly fine, but you won't be able to follow along today. So I would urge you to quickly get a database from here. 1 second, guys. All right. Copy this over. Of course, click on the eye icon here so that the stars go away and convert into the real password that you have. And once you do, just copy over this string and paste it here. This is all that Prisma needs to know of. Prisma needs to know कि भाई what is the real underlying database's credentials, because Prisma will actually do the writes over there and do the reads over there. So make sure you paste it here. I am going to run one locally because the Wi-Fi that I am on, for some reason, is not able to connect to any of these Neon Tech databases. So I'm going to run it locally. Some of you might remember from yesterday how to run it locally. I might already be running Postgres locally. I am. So let me just put my local Postgres credentials here. Cool. Taking a pause. How are we doing? Are you guys able to run all of these commands and replace a URL here? Let me do a quick poll. Shall I proceed? Are we good to go? (75, 76%. Let me look at Q&A really quickly. Can you show the tsconfig? So tsconfig is what the default tsconfig was. Replace outdir and replace sourcedir or rootdir, sorry. What is the right way to do DB URL? We will talk at some point, not today. Can you explain Prisma DB pool? Let's, I don't know what that command is, if I'm being honest, but let me look at it. I'm sure it just, I don't know, updates the database or something. Happy to look at it. Don't know right now what it is. Please tell me how to install the Prisma extensions to see its benefits. Yes. You can in Visual Studio Code install a Prisma extension here. That will give you some code highlighting. Prisma.schema will look a little cleaner for you. So feel free to install the Prisma extension in Visual Studio Code. Then you will see all the colors that I see here. And okay, bunch of questions off topic. For the people who don't understand this part, you should go to yesterday's class. Don't put any random URL here. Don't put what I have put here. You will need to either get a Postgres database from NeonDB or you will need to start it locally. Only then will this work. If you copy my code like this as such, it will not work. All right. Cool. Let's take a breather and let's go to the next slide. For the people who are facing issues, I would urge you to ask, just go to yesterday's class and make sure you have, we've not done anything new here. But yeah. And a few people are asking, should you hard code the database URL here? You shouldn't, but happy to discuss how it can get picked up from an environment variable later down the line. Let's first understand Prisma. Let's move on to the next slide if you're able to do all of this. Selecting your database. So as I said, you can literally write MongoDB here if you want, or MySQL here. The provider, you can define upfront, ke bhai, Prisma, please use Postgres. These are my Postgres credentials. If you were using MongoDB here, you could give it your Mongo connection string, so on and so forth. In our case, we're using Postgres, but yeah, it lets you flip the database. Prisma lets you choose between a database. You can update this thing to set up whatever database you want to use. And secondly, I would urge you to install this extension, not really needed, but if you install it, you will see the colors that I see in schema.prisma. Some of you might not be seeing this, blue color, green color here. It helps, not needed though. All right. We have selected the database. We have replaced the database string. So to quickly recap, what all have we done until now? Understood what Prisma is. Number 2, created an empty project where we have put all of initialized our dependencies and initialized Prisma. And lastly, gotten a Postgres database, put the URL here, and provider by default was PostgreSQL. Next up is the real bit where you'll be writing the code. This was all bootstrapping you have to do once. From here, you actually have to write application specific logic. Basically, if you have a user's application, how do you define your model? If you have a to-do application, how do you define your model? So on and so forth. So let's get into that next. In this slide, someone asked, can we use multiple databases in Prisma? No, you probably cannot. No, you cannot. It just gives you a way to specify just one. All right, let's get to defining our data model next. Let's say we have to create a simple application, a to-do application, which has a users table and a to-dos table. How will you define your model? What code will you write here that will tell Prisma ki acha, you want to create a users table which has a username, a password, a first name, a last name? And the answer is here, but let me write it down myself. So you have to define your model like this: model space the name of your model and then all the fields that you have. For example, ID, which is an integer, which is the primary key for this table, and the default value for this is auto increment. This part is the same as, if you remember yesterday, we did this create table users. ID serial primary key. Do you remember this from yesterday? We said the user ID will be the primary key, which is what ID is here, and will be serial, will increase from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 automatically, even if it is not provided. That is what this means. Okay, by default, it will be auto increment, which basically means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Under the hood, if you look at the SQL query that this will create, it will look something like this: ID serial primary key. So effectively, writing the model like this gives me an easier syntax to define my model, but under the hood, this will eventually get converted into a query like this. That is what Prisma provides you. You did not have to understand SQL syntax. You do not have to worry about, what the create table query looks like. You can define your model like this, and you have to learn some things here, not too many. For example, how to define your model, what is at ID, what is at default, but there are like 5, 6 such annotations you need to know of, and then you're good to go. That will most probably cover everything you need to create any use case. In our case, we're creating a to-do use case. So let's quickly write all the fields that a user needs for a to-do application. Username, password, first name, and last name are the 4 fields that are needed. So let me write those down. First name, which is a string, last name, which is a string, password, which is also a string. And that's it. Yep. And if you want to make first name optional, you can add a question mark here. Last name optional, you can add a question mark here. Password should not be optional. Password should always be required for a user, which is why there's no question mark here. And email should also always be required. Email should also be unique. No two different people should have the same email. This again is, let's look at the SQL query that this creates. You have defined the model like this. You have said, okay, bhai, I will finally have a users table, which will have these properties. Again, the syntax is new. Let's go through the syntax again. But this is how you will define your model. If in the future you have, a to-do model, it will look something like this: ID, int, ID, default, auto increment, and title, string, done, boolean, and description, string, something like this. So it's as easy as this to define your model. You don't have to worry about the whole create table query or like understand SQL syntax. You have to write this once. This will get converted into an SQL query. Do we understand this bit? We good to go? I'll pause here. Feel free to look at this and write it on your side as well. %, good, not great. But would urge you to complete this slide, which basically means add a users and a to-dos table in your application. Don't worry about foreign keys yet. Just create 2 tables or 2 models in your Prisma schema. One for users that looks like this, one for to-dos that looks like this. The one thing that I'm missing here is every to-do needs to have an associated user ID. Okay, by this to-do is for user 1, this to-do is for user 2, so on and so forth. So this is the final thing that was expected to be written in your schema.prisma file. We'll wait for 2 more minutes, take a breather, take a pause, and try to write this yourself. Try to marinate the syntax of the schema.prisma file, because this is where you spend most of your time writing SQL stuff or writing database stuff. Other than this, you never worry about SQL. You never worry about, what kind of queries you have to write. Whenever you realize that we have a new use case, you come to this file, you update the schema. For example, if I ask you if phone number needs to get added, so you will come here, you will be like, phone number is a new field, which is an integer, which is optional, or you'd probably want to do a string, which is optional, because the person could give you something like this, +91, something. So this needs to be a string and not an integer. So as your application grows, you have more use cases, you will update this file, and that's all you have to do. This is the only place you have to define your schema. Take 2 more minutes. We will restart at 7:45. Write this code locally. If you think that we're going slow, feel free to go to the next slide. There is some code we'll have to write in the next slide as well. And if you did not have a database, this is your time to get one from neon.tech. Yeah. All right, 2 more minutes and then we'll proceed. Looking at Q&A until then if there is any question. What if we remove some fields that violates integrity in the constraints? So if you do something like this, okay, first name string, and then you say password string, and this is, let's say I add this. I had a schema, we have some data in there, and then I add a phone number. And I say it's required, it's not optional. And if I try to migrate my database, it'll give me an error. It'll say, okay, bhai, there are already entries in there for phone numbers, for users who don't have any phone numbers. What value should I put there? So you actually have to give a default here, and only then will it work. So if you try to put anything that will break any sort of integrity, if you try to update the data in a way where, the database cannot handle it. This is not specific to Prisma. Even if you're running SQL queries, if you're maintaining your create table queries yourself, your migrations yourself, if you do anything that will break the integrity of your database, the database won't update. The same thing will happen here. Do you have to do npx prisma migrate like we run in git commit, or can we just run the way at the end and we will know the changes we did? You can just run it anytime you update schema. You don't have to run it on git commit. Can we do starting value to an auto increment function? I don't know. I will have to Google, which means you can Google and let me know. Slides are not working. I think they are. Projects.100xsteps.com seems to be up. If Prisma is TypeScript associated, then why int is used instead of number? Well, depends on the maintainers of Prisma, right? They wanted int to be written here. They wrote int. This int and this string, this is not a JavaScript file. So this isn't JavaScript syntax we are writing. So you can put anything in there. Depends on the maintainers of Prisma. They thought of using int. All right. Cool. Seems like a lot of people understand this. What do you think is the next step after this? You have written a random file. You have not written any SQL queries. You have not actually migrated your database. How do you do that? For that, you need to run the real command that will generate your migrations and actually migrate your database. The command for this is right here. npx prisma migrate dev, and then a name associated with your migration. What do I mean when I say migration? I mean, you are changing the database now. You are adding something new here. Specifically, you are adding a users table and a to-dos table. So you can run npx prisma migrate dev and give this migration a name. For example, I would name it user and to-do added. And if I run this command, this will actually, number 1, migrate my database. Number 2, create my migration files locally. Let's see what that means. Authentication failed, which means my URL here is incorrect. Let me fix that. And there we go. It says the following migrations have been created and applied from the new schema changes. Let's understand this statement. First, run it on your side. Take your time. What was the command? npx prisma migrate dev and give your migration a name. What does this mean? Migrate my database because I have made some changes in schema.prisma. I have added something, removed something. So migrate my database. Tell the database, okay, a new table has been created. And this is the name for my migration. We will see where this name comes in handy eventually. Run this command, take your time. I'm going to wait. Hopefully it runs for everyone. Unless you have some syntactical error here, it should just work fine. This is what I have locally. Take 15-20 seconds and then I will explain what has happened here. Are we good to go? Shall I proceed? Oh, mostly no. Okay, taking a pause here. Seems like a lot of people are facing issues. Most probably the people who are facing issues, is your Postgres URL correct? But let me also open Q&A and see what's up. Command to migrate. Prisma schema validation failed. How will the data of exchange be updated when new schema is added? All good questions. Cannot reach database. Cannot reach database. Seems like Neon Tech is down. You're basically seeing the same issue that I was. On my Wi-Fi, if I try to connect to a Prisma database, it doesn't work. And it seems like the same is happening for you. URL cannot reach server. Most people cannot reach this database server for NeonDB. I saw the same thing, nothing new. If I run it on my machine as well, I'll see the same error. I don't know if that's something up with Neon or that's something up with Neon. So what can we do? You can either get one. There are a few other providers. One of them is called Supabase. So you can go here, go to supabase.com and try to get one. Or there's one called Elephant DB, Elephant SQL. You can go here and also get one. These are all free. We're also at 7:50 here. So let's take a 10-minute break. We'll meet back at 8. Until then, let me try to get as many people as I can to run the database locally. So we'll meet back at 10 minutes. If you have any questions other than that, I'm looking at them as well. But yeah, NeonDB is working for someone. It's not working for me. So I can tell you it has some issues when you try to connect to it from a home Wi-Fi. So Krishunk, specifically for you, the issue is you haven't replaced this. You're still using the environment variable. Don't use that. Use this instead. Avian is working fine for me. If someone wants, please use Avian. Turn off security in Neon database. I think I did that. Let's see. What do you mean security? I think you mean access, and I think by default it has access from everywhere. Or you mean something else? Just let me know in Q&A. Migrate dev doesn't work. What error does it give you? It will fail the first time, but after running the same command second time, it will work. So run it a few times. That's also another suggestion people are giving. It's taking John Doe as a user. Is that correct? And not giving error valid credentials. It's working on Avon. Just use generate. Could you try making a project using TypeScript Prisma and get better understanding of the working the project? Yes, we will do that next. Drift detected. So for the people who are saying drift detected, basically you might have run Prisma in the past. You might have some data in there already. As you might see, I saw that as well. Drift detected, your database schema is not in sync with the migration history. Basically, I used the same database yesterday for a different Prisma project, and now I'm using it for a different Prisma project. So Prisma is like, I don't know what is happening. Until yesterday, there was a different migration that was applied. Today, a fresh migration is being applied. That is why I see this error locally. And I just, as you can see, I was basically running the app.100xsteps.com locally yesterday, which is why, as you can see, it says all of this. I don't know where it came from, because yesterday I was running the other app on the same database. Today I'm running this app, so it got confused, which is why I just told it delete the database and then do a fresh thing. It did it for me. Take your time, it's fine. You still have 8 more minutes. It's working on Neon. PG admin is the best choice right now. It's like liquid base then, which is maintaining a change log. What is liquid base? Yeah, if this does the same, yeah. Seems like this does database change, history tracking, version control your database. Yeah, you can think of it this way. Yeah, this probably. This might do database versioning as well, like the real data versioning as well. What we are doing is just the schema versioning. What's the difference between Postgres and MySQL? Subtle differences, different implementations of the same underlying protocol, which is SQL. Okay. Everyone's saying use Aven, so use Aven. Try using Aven. AIVEN. Let's see. This specific provider, they also let you bring up a Postgres database for free. Explain at ID and at default. At very simple. The best way you can understand this yourself right now, I'll explain it myself as well. But if you want to understand it yourself, go to migrations.sql. Search for migrations.sql through your project, or specifically, if you go to prisma/migrations/ whatever one folder will be created for you. And here you will see a migration.sql file. Open this file. I'm going to open it here. And here, what does it say? It says ID, serial, not null, email, password, last name and first name, and constraint user underscore primary key ID. It said that this ID of mine is the primary key of this database. That is what at ID does. If you put at ID here, it means this is the primary key for this table, and same for to do as well. And what does at default auto increment do? It puts serial over here. Okay, bhai, ID will auto increment from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in the end, it is the way for you to define how the underlying SQL query is created. Specifically at ID tells that this will be a primary key. At default auto increment says by default it will go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which in SQL means this serial right here. If I remove at default auto increment here, serial will go away from here. If I remove ID from here and put it here, or if I say ID is present in two different these things keys, for example, ID can be present here. No, it isn't. Why? And there are ways to create primary keys that have more than one rows. I'm not sure why I'm not able to get it here. But yeah, that's what ID means. That is what default auto increment means. I will get back to this though. I need to. Your primary key can basically be a combination of ID, email, first name, last name. That's what I was trying when I was putting ID at multiple places, but it's not letting me. So yeah, that's answer to your question. Hey, actually this is off topic, but should I wait for you to assign? Yeah, if I don't assign it for a day, then just take it. Do we need to put Prisma folder in source directory? No, you don't. Even if it's outside, it's fine. NPM versus NPX, a little confused. Yeah, NPX stands for node package executable. So basically means if you want just the executable thing directly right here, what does that mean? TSC is the TypeScript compiler. If you want to use it as a CLI, then you can use npx tsc, which basically means run the executable directly right here, even if you don't have it as a dependency in package.json. I don't think you understand that at all. So let me explain this better, show you real use cases in an offline video. But I refrain from saying high level anymore. But high level, npm versus npx. npm, node package manager. It lets you manage your packages. What all do you want to bring in package.json? npx, node package executable. If you want to execute something directly in your CLI is when you use npx. Why is DB so sensitive? What does that mean? Do we have to put Prisma folder in? So no, you don't. Open NeonDB in the browser to run. Then it worked for me after that. That just means luck. It just means the free database that you've gotten, it's going up and down, and then randomly it ran for you. I don't think if you open it in your browser, it does something special. We need to reset the public schema. This, do you want to continue? You can select yes, mngs js Anand. This will reset your database though, to make sure this database doesn't have anything important that you already had. If database tab is stagnant, Chrome will stop it. Once you go to the database tab again, it becomes active again and the connection works. That sounds super weird. You're saying if I go to neon.tech and if I go to projects here and if I go here, now this is active. Now I can connect to it. That sounds super weird. Does that mean they, yeah, okay, sure. Try that out. Trying to find a good question here. Unable to initialize TypeScript. Getting this error. Is it not? Yeah, you'll have to figure out TypeScript on your machine. So this looks like a Windows machine. Yeah, you'll have to figure out how to run TypeScript on your machine. I don't have a better answer for you, unfortunately. AVN is up and running. Database is now synced with your schema. That means you're good. This is the error that I'm getting. Authentication failed against database. Localhost. Credentials for Prisma not valid. Basically means your credentials here are incorrect. Your database URL is incorrect. Press skip for startup setup, then it works. I don't know what that means. Use Singapore. That might be a good suggestion. Maybe create the database that you're creating in a different location than everyone else. Then it might work actually, yeah. Drift detected. Do you want to overwrite? Select yes. If you don't have any data in your database, it will just overwrite all your data. So make sure you don't have anything useful in that database. Why is my database created in the public schema? Can I create with my own name? You probably can. let's see if there's an easier way to do that. You probably can, but I'm unsure if I can find a way for you to do that right now. Use Singapore location, reload the website, and then why is everyone saying it runs after you reload the website? How does reloading the website help here? I don't know. Try that out, I guess. Use .env, then it'll work. I mean, I don't think that is any better than pasting the URL raw over here. But if you want to try it, feel free to. If it works for you, great. I don't think it'll like that can fix any error. All right, 329 here. How many of you were able to run the command? Let's quickly check. Oh, not bad. Still at like 80%ish, which is, I mean, we have to proceed either way. But for the people who are facing issues, let me write down what might be the issue that you might be facing. Number one, you are not able to connect to NeonDB. Use Avon or Supabase or Elephant SQL. Best thing you can do is run it locally, which basically means use Docker to run it. We have discussed this yesterday. Number two, you have not pasted the URL like I have below. Number three, you have a old database that you need to override. When you run the command, it will ask you, when you run the command, it'll ask you, should I override? Just override. Basically, you might see one of these three issues is what I feel. And yeah, I think the best thing you can do is get one from Avon. Seems like for most people just worked. With that, let's proceed. I think we have a lot to cover next. But if you are facing issues, feel free to either drop off as well, or try to follow along without a database, and eventually when you get one, try it again. All right. With that, let's understand what happened when I ran this command. For a few people, this command ran. For a few people, it did not. For the people for whom this command did run, it did a bunch of things for you. Let's understand what all it did. Number one, it created these files for you. If you go to your Visual Studio Code, in your Prisma folder, it will create a migrations folder, inside which it has this another folder, inside which it has a migration.sql file. Once you ran this command, it created this file for you, which, as you can see, has two create table commands: create table user, create table to do. ID, it should say serial here, not null. ID serial not null. Where does serial come from? It comes from, if you go to schema.prisma, here we wrote at default auto increment, which means by default the value should go up. The first user ID should be 1, second should be 2, so on and so forth. The way to do that in SQL is this. We saw this yesterday. Prisma did it for us. And the other thing that you will see, other than the normal things that you see here, I guess one good call out here is email text not null, password text not null, but first name can be null, last name can be null. Why? Because we had a question mark here, we had a question mark here. All right. But we did not have a question mark here, did not have a question mark here, which is why this it says not null, this it says not null. And lastly, constraint, the name of a constraint, you can put any name here, doesn't matter. Primary key ID, which basically tells you, okay, ID is the primary key of this table, and ID is the primary key of this table as well. What is a primary key? We discussed a little bit yesterday. I should have probably dived deeper into it. But a primary key represents how can you uniquely find a row in this table. Users table mein, you can find a row uniquely. Ki haan, every user will have a unique ID. You might say that every user will have a unique email as well. Why is this not an ID? You are not wrong. You can, but I discussed this yesterday. People might want to change their emails. So you don't want this to be the unique ID people are identified from, because people might want to change their email in their journey of being on an application. Versus ID can always be constant. No user will ever come and be like, I want to change my ID. People don't even know their ID on a website. People know their username, which is another field, but not their ID. All right. So that's what this schema got converted into. Number one, Prisma created this file for you. Number two, it actually ran these for you on your SQL database. So if you're able to look at your SQL database right now, you will see it has two tables. Let me show you how you can do that. A lot of you might not be able to do that as well, which is fine. But if I open a terminal and run this command, psql -h localhost -d postgres -u postgres, here you will have to replace your own credentials. So this won't work for you. This is working for me because I'm connecting to my local database. If you want to connect to your database, you will have to replace the host with your NeonDB host, database with your NeonDB database, username with your NeonDB username. And you also need to have PSQL locally. You don't need to worry about this. I'm just showing your database has actually migrated. You don't have to worry about this command at all. Okay, let me put my secret password over here, which I can copy from here. And inside this, if I run /dt, which is something I showed yesterday, it will show you that it has these tables. If you don't understand all of this, it is fine. Yesterday also I explained that PSQL lets you run queries and explore your database. This is similar to MongoDB Compass. Just how MongoDB Compass you can see to explore your MongoDB database. PSQL you can use to explore your Postgres database. If you don't have this, it's fine. If you're not running it locally, this will not work. You'll have to change the host and the database. Try it later on. If your migration command ran, it means you will see a similar output where you will see three things: to do, user, and migrations. To do and user are your main databases. A new to do database has been created, a user database has been created. This is something extra. This is something that where Prisma sort of maintains that this database has done this migration. So it knows how to, as your application grows, how to migrate more. You can look at the contents of this if you want. You don't need to, but as you can see, it has one row in here because we've done one migration. If in the future we do more migrations, this gets filled up so that Prisma just understands what all migrations you have done. If you don't understand this, it is fine. But do we understand this? What are the two things that Prisma did for us? Created a to-do user table and generated this migration.sql file. Feels like I went a little too fast, so let me check. Oh no, we do understand this. Great. Sort of. 84%. Cool. So let me proceed a bit because we have a lot to cover. But if you're still confused, can you post in Q&A what you're confused about? Is it that it's just not working, or is it something else? Foreign key in Prisma. We will get to it very soon. Segmentation fault. How to view database tables running in Postgres and Docker. If you're running it in Docker, someone gave a very nice command in Q&A that you can run. You can run this if you want. Yeah, you can. I can explain what you can do. There are a few things you can do. You can SSH into your Docker container and run PSQL. Not working. So many concepts. Every time you have to migrate model, too fast. All right. Let's take a breather here. Let me quickly check how is the pace, and then I will still cover this, but seems like we will need an offline video for this. How is the pace? Good, fast, slow. I would have really assumed that the pace was slow, but I could be wrong. So let me launch a poll here really quickly. Oh, not a lot of people think it's fast. It's 13%ish. All right. And most people think it's good, and some people think it's slow as well. All right. So we will proceed then, but I will make an offline video for this as well because it seems like it's a little fast. All right. With that, now that we have the migrations, we have created the tables. Explore your database. You can run this command. Again, it will only work for some of you if you have PSQL and if you have the right credentials. You can explore your database and see what all tables were created for you. Next, we need to generate the Prisma client. This is an important concept. Specifically understand what do I mean when I say Prisma client is the hard bit. So before we understand what does generating a Prisma client mean, let's understand what is a client. This is a new jargon that's good to know of. Okay, what exactly is a client, or what exactly is a client in this context? If you remember the syllabus, there is a section here called auto-generated clients. This also means the same thing. It basically means automatically generating a few files which will contain all the code. Let me go to the iPad for this one. What does clients mean, or more specifically, auto-generated clients mean? It basically means कि भाई, if this was my project, right now it had a schema.prisma file, and eventually I will have my node.js file, index.ts. And I told you that the benefit of Prisma was that here you can write user.find1, or you can write user dot add, so on and so forth. Where does this user variable come from? How does your index.ts file import user? It will come from somewhere from Prisma, right? Prisma will auto generate clients. So that your index.ts file can use them. Prisma needs to understand that there is a user table here, there is a to-do table here, and it needs to create JavaScript classes or JavaScript clients that index.ts can use. That is what I mean when I say auto-generated clients. Okay, Prisma needs to automatically generate a few files based on your schema.prisma file that you had created. So eventually, what are the steps that occur in a Prisma project? Number one, you create the schema.prisma file. Number two, you run a command that generates the migration folder that we saw and actually migrates the SQL database. That's step number two. Step number three is you run a command that generates a client. And what is this client? It will expose a user class to you, a to-do class to you, that you can use in your index.ts file, so that you can simply do user.find1. And of course, under the hood, these auto-generated clients will convert and create the SQL queries. So do we understand what is an auto-generated client and why Prisma needs to create these auto-generated clients so index.ts can use them? We will see how we do this very soon. But do we understand what are clients? Oh, 50-50. All right. Let me run a command. Let's write some code, and then we will reach the client and see what exactly the client was. Let's write some code and then understand this a little better. And then if you not able to, I'm happy to explain it again. But let's look at what the slide says. It says client represents all the functions that convert this into this. I said the pitch of Prisma was that you don't have to write all of this. You can write a simple user.create. Where does this user come from? I have not written any class. I did not go to my Visual Studio Code and I just, as the developer, wrote a single file called schema.prisma. This is not even a JavaScript file. This is a .prisma file. How can I go to my index.ts? Let's say I create a source folder here and create an index.ts file. How will I do a user.find1? Where does this user come from? I don't have a import mongoose from mongoose. I need something to give me a user that I can do a user dot find one on. Where does this user come from? Where can I import it from? And the answer is the auto-generated client. After you have created this file, you need to tell Prisma, okay, bhai, I have two tables now, to do and user. This is what their structure is. Can you please create this user class where I can just call a function called find1 and that will give me the user so that I don't have to write the SQL query. That is what an auto-generated client is. But let's run the command, see what gets created, and then eventually understand clients a little bit better. So if you go back to the slides, you will see it says, once you have created the schema.prisma file, you can generate these clients that you can use in your Node.js application. And this is the command that you have to run for it. So try running this first, npx prisma generate. And then we will see what is this client that was created that I'm talking about. So in your terminal, run the command npx prisma generate. And if all works fine, you will see it says start using Prisma client in Node.js. Prisma client has been created, yada yada. Basically, it should not give you an error. If it doesn't give you an error, basically you're good to go. It has generated the client. What is the client? We will see very soon. But after writing this file, I had to run two commands. One, to migrate the database. Two, to create the client. These are the two things you always have to do anytime you change your schema.prisma file. All right. Let's see what this does. Let's see what the client is very soon. But were you able to run the command? All right. Now create a source folder. Let's write the real application logic now. Create the source folder and create an index.ts file out inside it. And let's start to write some code here. If you saw the logs, it said you can do something like this. Import Prisma client from @prisma/client and const Prisma is equal to new Prisma client. Try pasting this code here or writing it yourself, either works. What is the thing you have to write? Import Prisma client from @prisma/client and then const Prisma equal to new Prisma client. Write this much code. This is similar to import mongoose from Mongo and then doing a mongoose.connect. Nothing new here. Just importing the mongoose library or importing the Prisma client for now. Now that you have this, write some code with me. Prisma dot write us. You will see you get user. You get Prisma.user. You imported a library and it has Prisma.user by default. How? How did it know that your database has user? You can basically use this to do a create or to find or to update or to delete. This one line of code gave you all the constructs to interact with your database. But how did it know that Prisma.user is something, Prisma.todo is something, and not Prisma. Course selling website or course table? Because when you ran this command, when you generated the client, a file got generated which has all of this code. That is what I mean when I say auto-generated clients. Okay, when you run this command, some extra code got put in here in @prisma/client. This isn't what's present on the npm registry. This is some specific client that you have created based on schema.prisma. That is what I mean when I say auto-generated clients. Okay, if you run this command, some new code gets put in @prisma/client. If I hover over this and click over this, it takes me to a file which has the definition of user, the definition of to do. So all of this got generated from my schema.prisma. So the process of converting this schema.prisma into this client is what's called the auto-generated client. And this is the command that you have to run for it. Do we understand this part now? Okay, cool. 90%. Beautiful. So what's left then? You created your schema.prisma, you migrated your database, you created your client. Just use the client. Next up, we just have to write a few functions which let you insert data, get data, remove data, which should be straightforward. Let's move on to the next slide. Creating your first application, create an insert function. There is some starter code here. Paste the starter code here and try to create an insert function that lets you insert a user given their username, password, first name, and last name. Can you write this code now? TypeScript will help you. If you write Prisma here, turn off GitHub Copilot. Don't use Copilot here. disable it. Even without Copilot, you can do a Prisma dot and it gives you a bunch of options. User is one option. Dot, it gives you a bunch of options. Create. What do we have to create? Username, password, first name, last name. It gives me an error. It says username is not a known field. Why is that? Oh, it is email. My bad. And there we go. That's how you can create a user. Of course, you might want to await it and maybe store it in a response and then do a console.log. But now you have an insert user function, which looks much cleaner than doing, a client.sql and writing insert into users, so on and so forth. So that is the benefit of using Prisma over a non-ORM library. That's what an ORM provides you. A simple auto-generated client that you can use to write your functions. Are we good to go? Is this simple? %, good, not great. Let's do some more functions. I mean, is it just that you need time, which I'm happy to just give time, that's the case. Or is there some doubt? Can you post in Q&A really quickly? Syntax is confusing. Syntax is something that I wouldn't say you have to memorize, but at the same time, it is a little opinionated. Why did they write data here, Harkirat? Why was it not directly this? Or why was this called data and not, insert data? Just what the developers of Prisma sort of did. The good thing is it does give you suggestions, so you can always, if you write last L here, it tells you last name is the key that you need to provide. So TypeScript does help you out. That said, for a create, for a remove, for an update, for a delete, there are standard keys that it expects. You can just sort of learn them. All right, time, it's fine, take your time, no rush. Why did you put data object? Because that is what the syntax unfortunately expects. It does not expect this. It would have been great if this is what was expected, because why do you need to put data there? But unfortunately there is a data key, because there might be other keys here. Okay, what all do you want to select? As you can see, there's another key here. Okay, I want to put in data, but I only want the ID back from this query, so that res has an ID. I don't want a username and password. That is why you need data. If I write directly like this, how will I tell what all I need to select? That is why the data that you need to put in, you put it here. The data that you need to select back, which basically means what should res contain? Should it contain ID? Should it contain ID as well as password? You can put here, and then there might be other things that you can have here. Let's see. You can actually go here to the definitions. It'll be a little confusing if this is the first time you're looking at it, but as you can see, if you really want to explore, you can explore and see select is one key it expects, data is another key it expects. You don't have to understand this, by the way, but if you wanted to, TypeScript really helps you out and gives you the exact types of what you need. All right, so you can actually go to the create function and keep going down the lane to understand what all keys it expects. But if you don't understand it, it's fine. It is just something you can sort of learn for now. When you're inserting, you need two keys, data and select. Now are we good to go? Okay, cool. Next up, we have an update and a get. We can write this. We can also proceed. Let's see what's left. Then based on that, we can decide. Relationships is left. So let's do a poll. I have to cover relationships again in Postgres, so I can just cover it for Prisma as well in the offline video. So we can practice right now. So at least what we have learned, we're able to practice, or we can move to relationships based on what the class wants to do. What should we do next? Practice or understand relationships? Again, if you don't understand it today, I will cover it in an offline video. Practice, all right. Okay, so let's write some code next for updating a user's entry in the users table. There is some starter code here which uses some TypeScript. So let me explain it a bit. You don't need to use TypeScript here, but you need to start to learn it. So, I've written some TypeScript code here. Even if you don't understand it, it's not fine. You should understand it. So this is very simple TypeScript code. If you don't understand it, it means you have not done TypeScript well. You should do it. All right. Copy over the starter code. Let's try to explore it a bit. Oh, I probably should insert a value here. Let me also run this file. Insert user harkirat@gmail.com, password, first name, last name. I'm just trying to populate my database, so I can try out the update query as well. So after you've written the insert user function and you've called it, you can run tsc-b or npx tsc-b to build your index.ts file, and then you can run node dist/index.js to actually run it. And as you can see, it returns me ID1, password, which is the two things that I asked for it. If I ask for first name as well, then it will return me. Oh, it will say a user already exists with this email. So let me try that one more time with a different email. And it says ID3, password, first name Harkirat. Can you see ID became 3 now? It is not 2. If I look at my users table, it has it has 2 users, but first guy's ID is 1, second guy's ID is 3. Can you guess why 2 isn't here? Why it went from 1 to 3 directly? Not a lot of people, so we can also do a bounty on this one. Can you guess why the ID went from 1 to 3 directly and did not stay at 2? No bounty. Sorry. There are a lot of people. There might not be a bounty, but let's see. We tried to insert. Sort of true, yeah. Username unique. 2 was deleted. Pointer. Cause of error. Yeah, that's probably the best answer I was expecting. But I think a few people above you also meant the same thing. So let's give it to Ganesh and Yuvraj and Abhishek. Okay, 3 people, $10 each. So that's $30. The problem was, and I'm sorry if you did not get it, it's fine. Like it's $10, does not matter. Okay, move on. The problem was, if I run a few, RNS queries, the auto increment function runs and it does, even if there's no insert, the ID does get incremented. So, now if I run it a few times, and if I build it again and run it, ID becomes 11 because, all of those RNS SQL queries also auto increment. All right, cool. Insert user works. The next one was update user. So copy the starter code and try to implement the code yourself again. Prisma will help you out. .user.update you have to do. And again, you can go here to update and look at the types and understand where is one thing and data is another thing. So I probably need to do where username equal to username, and data probably is the updated data that I need to give it, which is the first name and the last name. And of course, this is probably email. So that is how I would explore TypeScript and figure it out. You don't have to explore the types like this. I know this can look a little too jarring. So you can also, just Google Prisma mein how do you do an update, how do you do a delete, and you'll get it somewhere. This is the syntax to do it. You need a where key, you need a data key. And that's it. This was what was expected from the update. One thing that might be confusing is this Harkirat, what is this? And what was this section right here? And this is TypeScript. You don't need it. You can totally do this. Okay, the first argument is username, which is a string, and second argument is just an object, which is any. So, if you don't want the right type checking, but ideally you want to have decent type checking, which is why I said, update parameters look something like this. Whoever wants to update should give me a first name and last name in an object, which is what I'm expecting here as the second argument, first name and last name, and then I can use it here. So it's just better way to write TypeScript code. You don't need it. You can use any, you can flip off TypeScript totally. You can convert this into an index.js file. You shouldn't. You should start to understand this much by now. Okay, you know how you can start to use TypeScript in your project. All right. Is update clear? Are we good to go? I will also run this. Let me quickly run this as well. So let me call update user for person with username harkirat@gmail.com. You know, change the first name to Harkirat111 and last name to Singh. All right. And I should probably log this as well. So this is what the final code looks like for me. Update user function mein, I get the user, put it in res, and then console.log res. If I run this, I see the user was updated. The first name became Harkirat11111. If I make this Harkirat22222, the update will still happen. First name changed. All right. So that's update. Do we understand update? Can we do delete ourselves? Let's see. Do we understand update first? %. Let me open Q&A. Sir, please give 2-minute break. Nature's Prisma unknown validity. 1 minute. Error validating source DB. The URL must start with protocol Prisma. This is a new one. You are probably using an environment variable. If you are, can you replace the string over here with the Postgres URL? Auto increment skipped after failure. Okay, recap. Hi, I am also TypeScript part. All right, cool. Makes sense. There's a few things to chew here. For the people who do understand it, by the way, there's another assignment after this that you can try, which is getting the user's details, which I'm assuming is very simple. So try this out. And let me explain this part a bit more specifically, the TypeScript part and the auto increment part. So for the TypeScript part, this function expects arguments, right? You can either write this, ki username is a string, first name is a string, and last name is a string. This syntax works. And whenever you're passing it, you can give it, you know, the new first name and the new last name. This syntax works. Or you can be like, this will be an object. So how can you expect a single second argument, which is an object? You will be like updated object, which is an object of first name string and last name string. You can write this, or you can write updated object of type this. Updated object is of type this interface right here. Or if you really want, and you know, here you will use here something like this, first name and then last name. This is another way to write it. Or the third way to write it is कि यहाँ पे you destructure out first name and last name and then use them directly here. So it's just different syntaxes of writing the same thing. You don't have to understand this. I mean, you have to understand this syntax eventually, but if you don't understand it, you can write it in a different way. Okay, as simple as this: string, last name, string. All right, that was the first part. The second part for which we had the bounty was, okay, auto increment function in Postgres doesn't, it goes from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 like this. ID keeps on incrementing. But if an insert fails for whatever reason, the ID will still increment. The value will not reach the database. As you can see, it has 1. My current table has 1, 3, and 11. It has 3 IDs, one for 1, one for 3, and one for 11. Where did 2 go? Where did 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 go? When I was trying to insert a user the second time, there was an error. I was trying to insert the user with a username that already existed. I was trying to violate a constraint, which is why the 2 ID sort of vanished. It tried an insert, did not happen. The auto increment ID got increased by 1. And then when I inserted the third time, then it became 3. And then I did a bunch of erroneous inserts. It reached 10. And then at 11, the insert actually happened. All right. So that is what the auto increment bit was. Let me quickly check how are we doing now. And I think I can open it up for Q&A after this, because I'm assuming you guys can do the gets yourself. I don't think we have the energy anymore to understand relationships, because relationships are very complex. So let's do that in an offline video. If you look at the slides, there's relationships that's left. There's, after we understand relationships, some more practice, and then converting an creating an express application using Prisma and TypeScript. This will be the assignment for this week, along with some smaller assignments. I'll formalize this a little bit more on GitHub. But yeah, that's what I will cover in an offline video. We'll try to get it to you guys by day after, most probably Tuesday. And that's it. So if you understood everything, perfect time to drop off. Or if you have questions, I'm going to open chat now and answer them. So any questions, guys? All right. Use Rectangle. It'll make your life easier. What do you mean Rectangle? Is that an application? You are running tsc-b in the wrong folder, Harsh. Go back a folder. You're running it in src folder. You need to run it in the ORM folder. How to put video/images in SQL database? You don't put SQL and images in. Okay, this looks interesting. In a database, you put them in what's called an object store. We will most probably discuss this because a few people were asking for this, but you would use something like S3 to store it, and not, a database. Never store an image in a database. Worst idea ever. Someone posted something. This looks like a solution. Looks pretty good. How to pull? Okay, answer that. How I'm getting this error? Found 2 errors. Prisma client library ? Expected. Can you update your node version, Shrestha? Can you try updating your node version? Oopsie daisy. Improved the theme, doesn't flash anymore. See this pull request. Let me look at that. I'm looking at these very aggressively, so I will look at it by tonight, most probably. Prisma schema validation, get config wasm. Can you, let's see, happy to Google it. I was facing the same issue. Windows, my system, solved it like this. Copy this thing from the menu file, paste it in Prisma.env. Are you using .env? And if you are, can you try replacing the URL directly here in schema.prisma and see if that fixes it? We haven't discussed indexes yet. Indexes are part of 1 to 100, even though if you want, I'm happy to discuss it right now. We'll have to rediscuss it in 1 to 100 when we do advanced database concepts. I'm creating a React progress tracker where I want to implement a countdown using set interval. Is this the right approach? Yeah, if you want to do it on the client, then this is the right approach. If you want to store it on the server, then it is the wrong approach. Basically don't update your database every 1 second. Use some sort of a single timestamp. But if you're doing it on the client, yes, set interval is fine. Postgres relation database तो समझ आ गया, but ये Docker use करने वाला system नहीं आया बिल्कुल भी. A different video for this. Yeah, a lot of people asked for. So let me do a video of how you can grab a Postgres database locally, how you can get a free Postgres database and Docker. I'll create a video on this. What is the error due to index.js file? What is index.js file? Well, so if you go back to the TypeScript class, when you're using TypeScript, you create your .ts file in source slash whatever index.ts, and once you build this, a dist/index.js file is created. This basically contains all your TypeScript code converted to JavaScript, and that is why I'm running node dist/index.js. You should go back to the TypeScript class to understand this slightly better. Please explain the migration part again. And also one question, many people say SQL doesn't scale. Then why YouTube uses SQL? Please explain migration again. Okay, so let's start with migration. When you have a very big project, right? Or as your application grows, if you remember, we went to schema.prisma and had a simple schema. Okay, users table looks like this, to-dos table looks like this. As time goes by, you might add something new here. Okay, bhai, phone number is also a string, which is optional, and country code is also a string, which is optional. Country code represents +91 for India, +1 for US. Phone number, country code. Now that you have done these two things, a new SQL command needs to be generated. So if I go to my terminal and do a npx prisma migrate dev and give it a name, update or add username, this command will create a new migration.sql file for me here. Which if I look at it, what does it say? It says alter table user, add column country code, add column phone number. It created these SQL files for me. And now I have two migration.sql files that I can eventually run on any database and migrate it to follow my schema. Harkirat, why did the change not come here? Why did it not become country code text and phone number text? Why did it go to a new file? Because you want to incrementally store migration updates. You want a good track of everything that happened over time, because some databases might have, database 1 might have already migrated using this much data. And if you update this, it will get confused. Versus if you have a new file, it will understand that this was the original migration that I have. This is the new migration that I need to have, which is why you always have, migrations that are created one on top of the other. You don't update the original migration file to add, country code here and so on and so forth. That's what migrations are. Second question was SQL does scale. You just have to do it in a weird way. There are ways to scale SQL tables. Worst case, you do something called sharding. Best case, you vertically scale. You can also horizontally scale. So it's not necessarily true. Okay, the thing about Mongo or NoSQL databases, they scale very well as you add a more server. You add another server. You had two servers. You could support X users. You add a third server. You can almost reach 3 by 2 of X, something like that. It scales very linearly as you add more servers. It doesn't happen for SQL, but there are ways to scale SQL as well. So, and unfortunately, fortunately, whatever reason, most applications will use SQL unless you have a very weird use case where you have to store something that is better stored in a JSON. People use SQL. There's always hard to specify. Why does someone use Prisma versus PG versus Mongoose versus Mongo? Developer's choice. And no one really thinks of this when startups are coming up. Whatever is the fastest way to get off the ground, and slightly cleaner. Fastest way to is Mongo, but slightly cleaner way is SQL with Prisma. So people use SQL with Prisma. Let's see. Okay, a few repeated questions. All right, opening it one more time here. Cool. Start from the top. Does processing speed decrease in any terms? Could be running the query. Example, when ORM is used, can I undo the migrations? You cannot undo the migrations. You can remove, let's say I remove this username query that phone number, I added phone number, I remove phone number. So, it will be like delete. It'll add a new migration, which says alter table, drop column country code. So you can remove them. You cannot, it's always incremental. You have a complete audit log of how your database was migrated. You don't, you cannot undo your change as in undo the migration and be like, I don't want phone number here. You will have an insert. you can follow that with a drop as well, so that you don't have the phone number column, but you can't really update it. You can incrementally delete it. Does migration mean deleting all the previous schemas and rewriting the whole schema again, and then I add the previous data again? Can you? No. So migration means there is a database, a new database. Right now it has, you run Prisma migrate. It gets this SQL run first, then this SQL run, and then this SQL run. By the end of it, it will not have country code because the last migration drops it. And if in the future more migrations are added, none of these will run. The fourth one will run, the fifth one will run, because that database already has 1, 2, and 3. How does that happen? If you might remember, in the table that was created, there was a underscore Prisma underscore migrations table here. So it knows what all it has already done, what all it needs to run. What was the second question? Can you explain auto-generated clients? Is it like a function or a prototype or a schema or a structure of a... Yeah, it's what do you mean when I say auto-generated clients? Where does Prisma.user come from? Let me hover over it and click. It opens this index.d.ts file. Where is this index.d.ts file? This is in the JavaScript file. This is what's called a declaration file. But where does it come from? .prisma. If you look at the suggestion that comes when I hover over it, .prisma/client/ index.d.ts. If I go to node modules, there will be a .prisma folder here, where if I go to index.js is where you can see, the actual implementation of create. Here is where somewhere you will find, create user function, update user function, things like these. This lot of JavaScript code and lot of declaration files that were created is what's called the generation of an auto-generated client, like creation of an auto-generated client. Basically means everything inside this folder, the .prisma/client, was generated from a single file, the schema.prisma file. Given this file, all of that code that you saw in the node modules Prisma folder was created just using this. And why is that useful? Because now that you have that client, you can use it directly, prisma.user.update, rather than, that's what an ORM is, right? An ORM needs to generate a client so that you can use functions like these. You can use prisma.user.update. The Prisma library by default doesn't have this user function, right? You have user in your schema, which is why you see prisma.user here. So if I'm importing this from node modules, if this comes from somewhere, something extra should be added there, right? Based on my schema.prisma. That is what generation of a auto-generated client mean, or like auto-generated clients mean. Hopefully that's clear. Maybe not. Feel like I said a few things again and again and did not explain it very well. Let's do Docker first to make our life much easier. Let's do a project first. Iske baad, an end-to-end project as to how I would build a project using React, Node, TypeScript, all that jazz. Then we'll get into Docker, monorepos, OpenAPI spec, auto-generated clients, and then we're pretty close to the syllabus of 0 to 1. How should one see the database table on Docker? And should I update my RAM to 16 GB for Docker? If you're not able to run Docker locally, then yes. And you can see database by using pgadmin. It's a GUI similar to Mongoose. Lets you see everything. pgadmin may just put the credentials of your local Mongo database and you can explore it. Will migrations have .sql extensions for MongoDB? No, they won't. Do you even need a migration for MongoDB? MongoDB does not have the concept of, you defining your schema up front. So most probably we can try it out. I don't know. I have never used this thing with, Mongo. But let's say we do. If I use MongoDB here, and if I use my MongoDB credentials string, which this looks right, I have MongoDB running locally. As you can see, it already gives me errors because I cannot use auto increment most probably in MongoDB. Let's see. What is the error here? Oh, it needs to be underscore ID, of course. It doesn't need to be it needs to be a string. This line is not a valid attribute of field. We'll have to see how to do MongoDB Prisma. MongoDB Prisma. The instructions are slightly different for using Prisma with MongoDB, but let's see. Let's quickly try it out. TSC init connecting to your MongoDB database, provider MongoDB database URL, creating the schema. There you go. ID should look something like this. There we go. Now the type needed to be db.objectID. Now that I have this, let's run the migrate command. Let me delete all the existing migrations. Not the best idea to do it live, but basically run this, try it out. Most probably it will not create any migration folders for you because NoSQL does not need create table queries, right? You can have a very non-strict schema. Let's see. Let me try this out. Yeah, my database is down, but yeah, try it out. Let me know what happens. Can you comment on Nex compared to Prisma ORM? ये तो मैंने सुना भी नहीं है. Let's see. Nex ORM. SQL Builder for JavaScript. I have never used this. I don't know. Most projects that I've seen, I've never seen this before. Does it mean you cannot use it? You can use it. Seems like it's something similar to SQL Query Builder, but yeah, it depends on what the project is using, what you want to use. Yeah. Does processing speed decrease by any terms running a query, etc. when ORM is used? No, it's still using an SQL query, still running an SQL query, does not matter. What is username : email : username when inserting? What is email : username when inserting? What does that mean? Email : no idea what that question is. Off topic. Can an HTTP request last longer than just the standard request response? You can keep it connection open for a longer time. What's it called? There's a specific name for this. I have not seen people do it. You can do it in a certain way. So that, or the interview question answer is yes, you can do it. The general answer is no, you shouldn't do it. But yeah, you can do it. There is a way to do it. Long running requests where you can send data incrementally from the server. Postgres is running on Docker, but I have no idea about Docker. Yeah, we will cover Docker eventually. It is just an easy way to start Postgres locally. Let's say you have the users table with millions of users. With a key was initially not unique, but over time we found out that we need this key should be unique, but my previous entries might have duplicate values. What would you do? Oof. Good question. You have to suddenly make values unique. I don't know what's the standard answer for this. If I had to do, if this use case comes up, for example, let's say phone numbers. We let people put in phone numbers, eventually realize that nahi yaar, phone numbers need to be unique. So we need to enforce uniqueness on phone numbers. So you can do a few things. Number one, add a new column called unique phone numbers. Okay? Then copy over the people who at least have unique entries into this new row or like new column. And then the people who did have conflicting, phone numbers. If there were two accounts that had the same phone number, drop the new entry does not have any phone number for them, and then they're just re-asked for their phone number. So just retire the old column, create a new column which needs to enforce uniqueability, and then over there, the people who had right values, which means weren't repeated across multiple rows, copy over their phone number as such. The people who did, assume they've not put in a phone number right now and ask them to update. That's what I would do. It's a pretty good interview question, but I don't know. There's maybe a better standard answer for this. This is what I would do. Let's do Docker first as well. Let's do it. Docker, we have a YouTube video on Docker, which is pretty good, by the way. I think Postgres is preferred because of its features and open source nature. MySQL, on the other hand, is owned by Oracle. That might be a good reason, actually. Yeah. Do migrations need to be paired with data migration as well? If yes, what happens if we lose out on DB data? Do migrations need to be paired with data migrations as well? What if yes, what happens if we lose out the DB data? Do migrations need to be paired with data migration as well? No. So you have all your schema migrations in one place. You migrate your new table, new database once. If you want to migrate your data over, then you dump it and then separately put it in the database. And okay, I understand your question a bit now. So if you're using Prisma, you should, I don't know this is ideal, but this is what I did recently when I had to do something similar to what you're asking. First migrated over the schema, then from my original database, dumped all the queries, did not dump any create statements. You can do it when you're trying to dump a database. You can specify, okay, I only want the queries, the insert queries or the update queries I don't want any create table queries. So dump the data that way and then put that data in the different place. So basically do your schema migrations via Prisma, do your data migrations via dumping the old database and putting in the new one. All right. Does migration mean deleting all the answer that? Someone posted something. DB setup with Docker. For anyone looking for an easy DB setup using Docker, this is using Docker Compose. Looks pretty good. There's a link in the chat. You should look at it. Can you comment on answer that? So Prisma lets us create schemas and insert data with a user-friendly syntax better than SQL queries. Then why are we using SQL queries in the code base of the site that you showed us the update after the commands in your site code? So Prisma lets us create schemas and insert, delete queries, friendly syntax and SQL queries. And why are you using SQL syntax in the code base of, oh, my site, I'm not using SQL syntax. This thing that I showed you was my migrations. I did not show you the actual code, right? What I showed you was this Prisma / migrations / the real SQL queries. I have not written these. These are my migrations. If you look at the real code, which is somewhere here, you'll find one. You'll find the standard Prisma queries. I have not used any SQL in the code base. At least I haven't written any SQL. The SQL that you did see, for example, here you see db.course.find many, right? So this comes from Prisma. I have not used any SQL or written any SQL in my code base. Why am I getting this error? Let's see. This I will have to look at. Try deleting your node modules, updating your delete your node modules, convert from npm to yarn, and then run a yarn install and then try it. How to put video / image in an SQL answer that you shouldn't. Oh, fucking A. Let me start from the bottom. Repeating question. Let's say you were users. Okay. Millions of tables. Don't you answer that? Let's do. Okay. Answer that. Not related to Postgres. In case of Instagram, let's say you don't delete your user data when the delete on the account happens and the username should be unique. So how can, someone asked this yesterday as well. Need to implement what I'm working on. Because if someone deletes your account, ideally you should wipe off their data. That's their expectation as well. But let's say you don't want to do that. How will unique usernames work in this case? This is what I would do. Okay, when someone is deleting their username or deleting their account, I would mark deleted as true. I would mark their username as null. And I would create a new column like last username known, last known username, and store the last known username of that user when they deleted their account there. That's how I would do it. But if I said this yesterday as well, if a user wants to delete their account, is probably very I don't know. I don't know if you should delete the row for the user. In this case, of course, I mean, even not in this, every case this would be a problem, right? If someone says I want to delete my account and then they re-sign up, you want a new user created for them, right? And if when they deleted, you did not actually delete them, their email will already be present in the database. So you can do, I don't know, you can move them over to retired users, but there are no constraints, like a new table called retired users where you can put them. I don't know. I would just delete the user. If a user is deleting their post, I would mark it as deleted in an entry. But if a user is deleting their account itself, I would just delete them or move them to a retired folder, I guess, a new folder, a new table, which contains an audit log of all the users who deleted their accounts. How did the database table in Docker? How did we see the database in Docker? Answer that. Just use pgadmin. It lets you do it. Can you answer that? A few full stack projects we can do with Pern? What is Pern? What is P? Is it Perl? I don't know. What is Pern? Pern stack. Do you mean P and PM? What is P in Pern? Oh, Postgres. Oh, fucking A. It's called Pern. Okay. Good. What we can do, I mean, we will do, I don't know, thinking about it. We will do a project next, most probably next week. We'll do an end-to-end project or in an offline video. I don't know yet. I don't know what a good project is. To-do application to banai lena. At least make a to-do application by the next class. but let me think of a good project that we can build. I haven't thought of it basically. Whenever we deploy backend application which uses Prisma, we need to do below in order in my YAML file. Prisma migrate, Prisma generate. Is my understanding correct? Yes, you need to migrate. Whenever you update your Prisma file, you need to do it. Anytime schema.prisma.schema, whatever that file was, is updated, you need to run both of these commands. Yes. Is Prisma client and Mongoose equal? Is MongoDB client? So technically, Mongoose is what's called an ODM, but yes, your understanding is correct. Mongoose is sort of a MongoDB client. Sort of. The thing is, so the user that you create, that is the client. If you use Mongoose and the db.js file that we create in Mongoose, whenever we have used Mongoose in the past, we used to, if you remember, create a db.js file or create a folder called db-have-index.js file, where I would do a const mongoose equal to require mongoose, and then here I would do a const user equal to mongoose.model, and then do a few things here, and then finally do a const user schema equal to mongoose.schema, and then return user schema. This file is what you can call a client. Okay, we have written a bunch of code. Now anyone can use this user schema to do a .put.create.get. So that's technically what a schema, a client is. So Mongoose is similar to Prisma. This file is similar to the .prisma, like the node modules / .prisma file that I showed a while back, which is the auto-generated client. So this auto-generated client and your db.js file is the same. Mongoose and Prisma, the libraries are the same. Next class will probably be a project building class. I'm getting a red squiggly under data. It is not assignable to this. You're probably passing in. It's a very clear error, right? It says username is not missing from the properties. Basically, yeah, most probably you need to pass an email and not username. Our schema, if you look at it, has emails as a field and you're passing in username. That's what the error says as well. How to get rid of auto increment ID when getting error? How to get rid of? Oh, you cannot. If you use don't even go there. You can start to maintain IDs yourself, but don't go there. It's fine. If you don't need to necessarily have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 users like that. Even if a few IDs get skipped because of some reason, you can add validation at your Node.js level to make sure you're not trying to put in RNS data or something like that. But yeah, it's not a problem if you don't have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 users like this. Can you so that I've not used Next, so I don't know why it is better than Prisma or is it worse. I'm happy to look at it and understand what it does. Seems like it said it is an SQL schema generator, a query generator, which seems like just easy for you to, same write functions that under the hood get converted to SQL queries. But I'll have to look at it to understand why it's better. Generally, I would say it's not better. Prisma is sort of, just the standard. By standard, I mean a lot of people are using it, which is why I would use it. How do you create schema or Prisma file and Prisma folder? npx Prisma init. npx Prisma init. This command, if you run, it generates the folder and the schema or Prisma file. Is it necessary for Prisma? Use Prisma only for migrations? Or can it also be used for CRUD operations, similar to how we interact with MongoDB? We did use it for CRUD, right? If you're using Prisma, use it for CRUD as well. Create the client and use it. Is Prisma useful for when we have a database initially created on an SQL server and we want to switch over the database? Yeah, if you use Prisma from the beginning, it will be easy for you to switch from Postgres to SQL. More technically, you won't have to change any of your code base when you do that. You just have to change this from MongoDB to MySQL, and replace this with your MySQL new database URL. Run the migrations, copy over the data, and you're good to go. You won't have to change any of your application logic, which means the index.ts file here. That is why it's useful to use Prisma. And you can flip from one DB to another. I think Postgres is prefer. Okay, answer that. I did a project for a friend's business, and now it's just on React, the feature might Strap API or Firebase. I compared. I completed writing code. Could you please guide me the next step? I don't know where to host the project. I did a project for a friend's business, and now it's just React. In the future, it might use Strap API or Strap AI, whatever it's called, or Firebase. I completed the writing the code. Could you guide me how to? So to deploy it, use Vercel. And if you are using something like Strap AI or Firebase, you don't need to host the backend. They do it for you for pretty cheap. So yeah, there you go. Just use Vercel for the front end. Backend is auto hosted. Let's say we have the user answer that. How will we see database table in Docker? Should you operate to 16 GB if you feel like your machine is not able to handle? Then yes. Will migration have answered that? How will I see databases in Docker? Use pgadmin and connect to it. Connect to your local Postgres. Am I right? If we install locally this thing and this thing, then we run globally this thing. If we install locally, then npx Prisma init and npx tscnet. You don't even have to install locally if you're using npx. If you install globally, then yes, you can simply use tsc-init. But we made the data to be unique. Does Prisma fill the ID too with fake data or what? How does it flag it as a? So Prisma has nothing to do with it. This is SQL. Even if you do a failed insert query using SQL, it will, the ID will increment automatically. It's not Prisma keeping track of what the ID was. Query failed, so I will increase my ID. It's just when the insert happens, an auto increment function gets called, which was like, okay, it was originally 1, now it is 2. Now if the insert failed, it will be like I'm still at 2. And if the next insert happens, 3 gets inserted. So nothing to do with Prisma. I'm able to access NeonDB using PGA inserted successfully, but Prisma is showing can't reach DB. I'm seeing the same thing. So just use AIVEN, that service. Most people are not seeing issues there. I'll probably move there as well. I am seeing the same issue when I'm using NeonDB. How do you use syntax highlighting for Prisma in LazyVim? Just go and install the Prisma extension right here in Visual Studio Code. How to generate the ID like in MongoDB generate? How to generate the ID like the MongoDB generate? What does that mean? How do you, okay, answer that. Off topic, answer that. Okay, answer that. Don't repeat question, guys. So hard to keep track of them. I need to add rate limiting here. All right, same questions again and again. Cool. All right, then let's call it. I will follow up with a few videos this week. Then let's do a project next week. Let me do a quick poll. Oh, where are the polls? Do you guys want a Docker video offline? Yes or no? Like, should we do Docker offline? Yes or no? If you say yes, that means there'll be no live Docker. Should we do Docker offline? Yes or no? Okay, so Docker will be an offline video. Cool. Docker is done. Yeah, pretty close to syllabus, but I still feel if we want to build projects, we'll probably finish around mid of next month. By finish, I mean finish 0 to 1, and then we'll go from there. So, chalo, that's it for today. Let me follow up with a few offline videos. With that, let's end it. I will see you guys tomorrow. Oh, sorry, not tomorrow. Next week. Bye bye. A few more questions. Question uploading thing. Never really don't have the time. Creating it is one thing. Productionizing it is so difficult. Did not get the time for it. If you remove known modules and run npm install again, will it generate the client too? Probably not. You need to regenerate the client, I think. All right, cool guys. I'll call it good night, and I will see you guys next week. Bye bye.